Prince was halfway through Purple Rain at the Oakland Arena when he noticed something unusual happening on the side of the stage. Sarah Chen, the professional sign language interpreter he'd hired for the deaf attendees, wasn't just translating the lyrics anymore. She was crying, not gentle tears, but full body-shaking sobs, while her hands continued to move through the signs, translating words about purple rain and never wanting to cause pain. Prince watched, fascinated, as this woman somehow channeled the emotion of his song through her hands with such intensity that she was breaking down. What Prince did next stopped the entire concert, shocked 18,000 people, and created one of the most beautiful moments about music transcending every barrier that's ever been captured on film. It was November 12, 1993, and Prince was in the middle of his Act Two tour. He'd recently started including sign language interpreters at his concerts, after receiving letters from deaf fans who felt excluded from live music experiences. Most venues placed interpreters in a corner, barely visible, an afterthought for compliance. But Prince had a different vision. He put the interpreter on the stage itself, elevated, lit, visible to everyone. Because if music is universal, he'd said during rehearsal, then everyone deserves to experience it equally, not hidden in a corner, front and center. Sarah Chen was 29 years old and had been a professional ASL interpreter for 7 years. She'd grown up as a coda, a child of deaf adults, with 2 deaf parents who taught her that sign language wasn't just communication, it was poetry. It was emotion made visible. It was the music that deaf people could see. Sarah had interpreted everything from medical appointments to business meetings to college lectures. But this was her first concert. Her first time trying to translate not just words, but soul. When Prince's team had contacted her agency, asking for an interpreter who understood music and emotion, Sarah had been terrified and thrilled. She'd spent 2 weeks studying Prince's lyrics, watching his performances, trying to understand not just what he said, but what he meant. How do you translate Purple Rain into sign language and capture the yearning, the heartbreak, the spiritual longing? How do you make hands feel like guitar solos? How do you sign pain in a way that makes people understand it's about so much more than hurt? The concert had been going well for 90 minutes. Sarah stood on her elevated platform stage left, illuminated by a dedicated spotlight, translating, "Let's go crazy and when doves cry and kiss." The section of deaf attendees, about 40 people who'd bought tickets specifically because Prince offered full ASL interpretation, watched her hands with complete focus. But Sarah wasn't just performing for them. She was performing for Prince's vision that everyone, hearing or not, deserved the full concert experience. Then came Purple Rain, the song Prince was most famous for. The song that had defined a generation. The anthem that people proposed to, mourned to, found God to. As the opening notes played, Sarah felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just another song to interpret. This was the song. The one that would test whether she could truly translate emotion through her hands. Prince began singing, his voice carrying that distinctive ache that made Purple Rain transcendent. Sarah's hands moved through the signs. Purple, rain. I never wanted to be your weekend lover. Her training had taught her to stay neutral, professional, invisible, but something about these lyrics, about Prince's voice, about the 18,000 people swaying in unison, broke through her professional walls. Sarah thought about her parents, who'd never heard music but had taught her that beauty exists in all forms. She thought about every deaf person who'd been told they were missing out on something essential by not hearing. And she thought about what Prince had done by putting her on this stage, visible, valued, equal. The tears started during the first chorus. Sarah tried to blink them away, tried to maintain her composure, but Purple Rain wasn't allowing it. Her hands kept moving, translating every word, but now they were translating her own emotion too. The signs became more fluid, more interpretive, more like dance than strict translation. She was signing the pain in "I never meant to cause you sorrow" with hands that trembled. She was signing the desperation in "I never meant to cause you pain" with expressions that showed her own breaking heart. Prince noticed. He was singing to 18,000 people, but his eyes found Sarah on her platform, and he watched this interpreter literally embody his music. Her hands were telling the story his voice was singing, but with an added dimension he'd never seen before. She was translating English to ASL, but more than that, she was translating sound to silence, hearing to seeing, music to movement. And the emotion pouring through her was so pure, so authentic, that Prince felt his own eyes filling with tears. The deaf section of the audience was transfixed. They watched Sarah's hands with the same intensity that hearing people listen to Prince's voice. Some of them were crying too, not because they could hear the music, but because they could see it. Sarah was making Purple Rain visible, tangible, accessible. Her hands were painting the song in the air, and every deaf person watching understood not just the words but the soul. But Sarah was losing her composure completely. By the second verse, she was sobbing openly while still signing. Her professional training was battling with her human heart, and her heart was winning. The lyrics, "I only wanted to see you bathing in the purple rain," came through her hands with such longing, such beauty, that it looked like prayer. The deaf audience members were on their feet now, some signing applause, others just staring with tears streaming down their own faces because they'd never experienced a song this way before. Prince made a decision that would shock everyone in the arena. He stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, kept playing for a few bars before Prince raised his hand, signaling them to stop. The music died. 18,000 people went silent, confused about what was happening. The only sound was Sarah's quiet sobbing from her platform, unaware that the music had stopped because she was lost in the translation. "Sarah," Prince said into his microphone. His voice carried through the arena speakers, gentle but clear. The interpreter's head jerked up, suddenly aware that the music had stopped. She saw 18,000 faces turning to look at her. Panic flooded her system. Had she done something wrong? Was she being unprofessional? Prince walked across the stage toward her platform, and the audience watched in confused silence. "Don't stop," Prince said as he approached her. "Keep going." Sarah stared at him, not understanding. "What?" "Keep translating," Prince said. "Show them the rest." "But there's no music," Sarah managed to say, her voice shaky. Prince smiled. "You are the music right now. Show us what Purple Rain looks like." What happened next became one of the most viral concert moments in history, long before viral was even a term people used. Prince sat down on the edge of the stage, legs dangling, and watched Sarah. He gestured to the deaf section, then to the whole arena. "She's been translating my music," Prince said to the crowd. "But she's not just translating words. She's translating emotion. She's translating soul. And I think we should all watch her finish this song. Because music isn't just sound. Music is what she's doing right now with her hands." The arena was completely silent. 18,000 people held their breath. Sarah stood on her platform, tears still streaming, looking at Prince, who nodded encouragement. "Finish it," he said gently. "Show us the purple rain." Sarah took a breath, wiped her tears, and her hands began to move again. But this time, there was no music behind her. Just silence. And in that silence, her hands told the story of Purple Rain. She signed the chorus, her hands moving through purple, through rain, through the longing and the pain. Her facial expressions showed every emotion the song carried. Her body moved with the rhythm that existed in her memory. And the deaf audience members who'd been watching her all night began to respond. Some of them started signing the lyrics along with her, creating a visual chorus. Others swayed to the rhythm that Sarah's hands were creating. They were experiencing Purple Rain purely through vision, and it was just as powerful as hearing it. Prince watched with visible emotion. He saw the deaf section of his audience experiencing his most famous song in complete silence and understanding it fully. He saw Sarah translating not just lyrics, but the entire spiritual experience of Purple Rain through movement alone. And he understood something profound about music that he'd never quite grasped before. Music isn't sound. Music is connection. Music is emotion made tangible. And what Sarah was doing with her hands was as musical as anything he'd ever played on guitar. When Sarah's hands completed the final sign, Purple Rain, the arena erupted. But it wasn't just applause. The deaf section was using ASL applause, hands raised and shaking, creating a visual representation of appreciation. And the hearing section was giving a standing ovation, while many of them cried, because they'd just witnessed music in a form they'd never imagined. Prince stood up and walked to Sarah's platform. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her hands. Sarah, overwhelmed and confused, nodded. Prince took both of her hands in his and spoke into his microphone while looking at her. "You just taught me something about my own song. I've sung Purple Rain thousands of times, but I never really saw it until you showed me. Thank you." Then he turned to the arena. "This is Sarah Chen. She's not just an interpreter, she's an artist. And what she just did was as much a performance as anything I could give you." But Prince wasn't done. He asked Sarah a question that changed everything. "Can you teach me?" "Teach you what?" Sarah asked. "How to sign Purple Rain. Just the chorus. Right now." The arena watched as Sarah, hands still shaking from emotion, taught Prince the ASL signs for the Purple Rain chorus. Purple Rain. I only wanted to see you. Underneath. The Purple Rain. Prince learned each sign carefully, repeating them until Sarah nodded approval. Then Prince did something unprecedented. He started the song over. But this time, when the chorus came, Prince stopped singing and instead signed the words using ASL, while Sarah sang them aloud for the deaf audience to feel the vibrations. The reversal was stunning. The roles had flipped. Now the deaf audience was hearing Sarah's voice while watching Prince's hands. And the hearing audience was watching Prince sign while hearing Sarah's interpretation of his own lyrics sung in her voice. The deaf section of the audience went absolutely wild. They'd never experienced anything like this. A hearing artist, one of the most famous musicians in the world, was performing in their language, was making his music accessible in a way that centered them rather than treating them as an afterthought. Prince was telling them through his actions that their way of experiencing music was just as valid, just as important, just as beautiful as anyone else's. When the song ended, Prince and Sarah stood together on stage, both crying, both transformed by what had just happened. The standing ovation lasted for 7 minutes. People in the arena would later say it was the most powerful moment they'd ever witnessed at a concert, not because of musical virtuosity, but because they'd watched music become truly universal. They'd watched barriers dissolve. They'd watched a superstar humble himself to learn from an interpreter and elevate an entire community in the process. After the concert, Prince spent an hour with the deaf attendees, using Sarah as his interpreter. He asked them about their experience of music, about what they felt when they couldn't hear it, about what they wished artists understood. Their answers changed his entire approach to live performances. From that night forward, Prince always had ASL interpreters at his concerts. Always visible, always elevated, always lit. He learned basic sign language himself so he could communicate directly with deaf fans. And he started incorporating visual elements into his performances, specifically designed to be appreciated without sound. Sarah Chen became a sought-after music interpreter after that night. Her approach, which Prince had validated in front of 18,000 people, became the standard for concert interpretation. She wrote a book called Signing the Unsaid, Music Beyond Sound, that's now required reading for ASL interpreters. But she never forgot that night at Oakland Arena when Prince stopped the entire concert to honor her work, to learn from her, to tell the world that music belongs to everyone. When Prince died in 2016, Sarah was performing at a concert in Chicago. She heard the news backstage and couldn't stop crying. That night's artist, who'd heard the Oakland Arena story, invited Sarah to come on stage. In front of 10,000 people, Sarah performed Purple Rain entirely in ASL, while the audience sat in complete silence. No music, no singing. Just her hands telling the story of Purple Rain, just as she'd done 23 years earlier. The video of that tribute went viral. Millions of people watched Sarah's hands move through Prince's lyrics and understood for the first time that music doesn't require sound, that beauty doesn't require hearing. That emotion transcends every sense and lives in the space between us when we're willing to truly see each other. The deaf community shared the video millions of times with captions that said, "This is how we experience music," and Prince understood. The legacy of that Oakland Arena concert extends far beyond one beautiful moment. It changed how the music industry thinks about accessibility. Major artists started prioritizing ASL interpretation not as a legal requirement, but as an artistic element. Music festivals began featuring interpreters prominently. The deaf community, which had often felt excluded from musical spaces, suddenly had advocates and representation. But more than that, Prince's willingness to stop his own concert, to learn from Sarah, to center deaf experience rather than treat it as an accommodation, showed what true inclusion looks like. It's not about making space for people at the margins. It's about recognizing that the margins are where the most profound truths often live. Sarah, crying on that platform while translating Purple Rain, wasn't being unprofessional. She was being human. She was showing Prince and everyone watching what his music meant when experienced through different senses. Music historians now point to that Oakland Arena concert as a pivotal moment in accessible performance. Prince didn't just allow deaf people to attend, he made them central. He learned their language. He performed in their medium. He told them through actions that their way of experiencing art was not lesser, but different and equally beautiful. That's what genius does. It doesn't just create, it learns, it adapts. It recognizes that beauty exists in forms we haven't yet imagined. Sarah Chen still interprets concerts. She's 56 now, one of the most respected ASL interpreters in the country. But before every performance, she touches the purple scarf Prince gave her that night in Oakland. She remembers him sitting on the stage edge, watching her hands, asking her to teach him. She remembers the moment when a superstar became a student and elevated an entire community in the process. This story teaches us that music isn't confined to sound. That emotion doesn't require hearing. That the most powerful performances happen when we're willing to break our own rules, stop our own shows, and learn from people we think we're performing for. Prince could have ignored Sarah's tears, could have let her stay in the background, could have continued his performance. Instead, he stopped everything to honor her artistry, learn her language, and show the world that music, at its core, is about connection. And connection requires no sound. Only willingness to see each other's humanity,